Alright, so we got episode 13, and I actually really enjoyed most of this episode. Even though they did kind of screw us over with that cliffhanger at the end, there was still quite a lot of good things in this episode. I've talked about how they've kind of started the season off real slow, and we had a whole bunch of things introduced in the first episode, carried out in the second episode, and then finally come to their mini conclusions in this episode. For example, we had Freydis come into the picture, she then promised Ivar a son, became queen, got pregnant off the manservant to pass it off as Ivar's son, and then cleaned up the mess. So that mini arc is over and ready to set the stage for what's going to happen the rest of the season. We had a similar arc with King Harald. He wins with Ivar, celebrates in Kattegat, he faces his feelings about killing his brother, confronts Rollo about what he's doing there, and then finally kind of has this bit of a conflict backward forward with Ivar until he realizes that he's not going to make a play yet, not now, he wants to fill his boats with treasure, slaves, and influence before he does that. So he takes his men and heads back to England. And of course we had the final arc of MARGRETHE's character. So now we have Ivar in place. He said he's a god, he knows what he's going to go for, and we can see his path to the end of the season really laid out. Harald's in place and he's ready to fight, and we're going to get some cool action with him in England. Vixen's really doubled down with Ivar, said he's going to stay with you, can't get rid of me. Now that he's lost his tie to Margaret, he's really independent again. So it seems like Vikings really sorted out where everyone should be, so they can set them up really nicely in the right place for the really big battles and action that happens in the later part of the season. The only thing that we didn't get a huge amount of closure on for this episode was the sacrifice. But I covered that a lot in my preview breakdown, so you can check it here if you want to watch that. So we move across to England, where everyone quickly finds out what Hackman did. Alfred, very angry and confused, confronts Hackman about it, and he actually plays it really nicely. In my previous breakdowns and reviews, I talked about how it was really strange the way that Alfred acted when he was talking to Hackman about Lord Cuthred, who had taken over as Bishop of Sherborne. He said he was a supporter of the regime when he was clearly not. He was probably the most active and vocal member against them. He confronted Alfred in the court, he told Hackman about it straight away, and was clearly involved with a lot more. So Hackman plays the really smart card here. He knows that kings who just put themselves in their reign really need loyal supporters, and if he puts himself as an albeit controversial figure but extremely loyal figure that will always fight for him, Alfred can't turn down that kind of ally. Having a person he can put in power who he can trust to throw away their entire life and career and everything just to protect them is so important, especially for a new king. All that Alfred can see is that his motivations seem to be getting back his position as bishop and killing Alfred's enemies. So Aethelred got really mad when he was confronted by Hackman about Lord Cuthred, and he got super enraged after he found out that Hackman killed him. Now, we didn't really understand it. It seemed really off his motivations. Maybe he was just a really religious and devout person who saw this as immoral. But then we find out there's bigger and deeper layers to this. We kind of get a full understanding of how he's been acting and all his motivations for the previous episodes from this episode, when we reveal that not only is he in bed with Lord Cuthred and his friends against Alfred, but he's marrying Lord Cuthred's daughter. This shows clear motivation for Lord Cuthred wanting to dethrone Alfred, not only because he's challenging the church, but his daughter would become queen if his son-in-law Aethelred became king. So they were clearly quite serious about overthrowing Alfred. So the Viking crew in England get together and they realize the situation's getting a little bit more dire. They see that Hackman's in prison and can't protect them anymore. They know that Alfred's throne is being challenged, and if that happens, they're going to be killed or kicked out very quickly. This leaves Ubbe open for the best time to introduce the offer that Alfred made them. As expected, Bjorn's extremely resistant to any kind of change against religions. He thinks it's an insult to not only himself, his religion, but their father. Ubbe tries to bring up the fact that Ragnar may not have been religious at all when he died, but Bjorn's not having any of it. Even with Bjorn's heavy protests, Ubbe and Torvi go ahead with it and really put themselves at Alfred's side. My favourite part about this whole episode was the discussion we had between Ubbe and Torvi, and they're like, I don't feel any different. Ubbe's quite curious about this cross and their traditions and what happens now. He's really conflicted about whether he should fully commit to this or how bad it is, and he's a little bit apprehensive about throwing away his arm ring, but he's chosen this way and he's going to commit to it. Well, at least a little bit. I think him keeping that arm ring will either leave him an open back into the Viking world, or more likely, be his moment when he really doubles down on the English life. After Ubbe fighting at Alfred's side, helping him, training him, working with him, becoming close friends with him, he'll get lands and respect and a real important place in this English world. And when that happens, he'll revisit the arm link and finally toss it aside once and for all. Ubbe shows the way that most of the Viking world historically goes. They mostly all convert, they mostly all change and integrate their culture with England heavily. Even though the conversion was mostly one way, the cultural integration was both ways. They really mixed their cultures and language heavily over this time, and really made England a very unique and different culture entirely. So Queen Elswith commits to Alfred. As she said, she doesn't have a home to go back to. Northumbria is overrun by Northmen, and she knows it's a possibility that Björn may have got her pregnant, so she needs to kind of get with Alfred quickly so that they can consummate their marriage very awkwardly and make sure that if the baby is born, everyone will believe that it's Alfred's. This is quite interesting because it seems like the family royal line is going to be mixed up again. Like the royal villa has been full of scandals before with Ecgberg and Lagertha and Judith and Athelstan, and quite ironically, Alfred came from this mixing with Athelstan, and now he's had the same thing happen to him where his own son might not even be his. Though if he does find it out, he might be in a more sympathetic situation to the plight of the child and really raise it as his own like Aethelwulf did. And the show, to make sure you haven't forgot about all the mixing of the lines and stuff, brings out Magnus again, another child who's possibly wrong about their own parentage. Now it's interesting to see how quickly Björn took Magnus under his wing, but if you understand how he feels super isolated right now from not only his brother and Torvi, but his mother who's with Hickman, it seems like he's in the perfect spot to bring in a new family member, especially someone who hates the royal villa. While the rest of his family is getting in bed with the English, he wants to leave them and really embrace what he believes is his real heritage. So I really see Björn and Magnus teaming up and really influencing each other heavily. Magnus will learn the Viking way from Björn and understand his heritage and his father, and Björn's bitterness against the royal family will be reaffirmed by Magnus. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about the future of Magnus and Björn, also what you think will happen with Björn and maybe Elswith. Is he going to try and make another play for her and be really angry about this fact that she's married, or is he going to give up on her now that she's with Alfred? Lastly, I want to cover King Harold's arrival in York. So we find out that Olaf is the kind of guy in charge here, the person that Ivar left there, and it seems like they've been there for quite some time, and they're just kind of messing around, playing games, and haven't done much. Harold's quite quick to say, you're not going to be in charge for very long around here, I've got big plans, and you need to join me. We get to see through characters like Olaf that most Vikings are pretty apprehensive to try and go against the son of Ragnar. They see them as quite important and famous people in this world. Harald has lived and fought alongside with the sons of Ragnar for quite some time, and he knows how human and flawed they are. Where most Vikings just see their lists of accomplishments and huge battles and their really powerful and glorified names, and see them above most men. So it'll be really interesting to see how Harald can get these people under his control and make them see that they can stand against the sons of Ragnar. It'll be a big challenge to fight not only Wessex, but to keep the loyalty of the men around him. And even if he does get them, backing them all the way as they fight England, it's going to be even harder to try and get them to come all the way back to Kattegat just to fight a son of Ragnar. Thanks for watching this review. I really want to hear your feedback because that's the best part about making these videos. You guys always have these really interesting insights and little things I didn't pick up, and it really gives me a better understanding of not only the episode, but Vikings as a whole. And if you did enjoy this review, it would be awesome if you could chuck a like on it, check out my Twitter, and maybe even my Patreon. Other than that, Skull.